Morning at NTV. Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni extended the country's lockdown over the coronavirus by 21 days. Now, this lockdown period will now continue from 15th April to May 5th. To help our viewers get through this, we decided to speak to someone who chose to become the spokesperson of travelers in the quarantine. He's also a university lecturer and a cartoonist, Dr. Jimmy Safaya Sentongo. Welcome to NTV this early morning, Doctor.
Thank you. How are you?
I'm fine. Now, Dr. Sentongo, right now Ugandans are worried about how they're going to cope up with the 21 days at home and all through. But you've been through this. How does one cope up in such a situation?
I think I wouldn't give any general recommendation or suggestions. It all depends on one's circumstances because I think it's our circumstances that determine how we can cope. This is a combination of both our personal abilities to cope and our financial and all other things that determine how one's mental state would be in such circumstances. So generally, I wouldn't say that one would have to do this or that. Personally, there are some that I would talk about that have to do with giving myself peace of mind and accepting that this is where we are. And whereas we might want to do things differently, certain things may not be able to change in the circumstances. So you just find a way of getting used, find alternative things to do if you can at home. But I know there are people who may not be able to do their work at home, so I cannot give any general suggestions.
You kept up in the quarantine by drawing cartoons or the likes. Could someone tap into their hobbies personally to just make sure that they can stay grounded?
Yeah, of course, those who can, you go back into the things that you've always wanted to do that you couldn't do. If your home environment can allow you to do that, yes, personally, I can continue drawing cartoons because, yeah, I can do that at home. Others can, if one can paint, you can. If you can do some gardening, if your home has that environment that can allow that, then you get to engage in that in order not to find yourself wasting a lot of time or sleeping all the time, because that in itself contributes to the worsening of the possible depression if one stays in just one place. Yeah, but as I said in the beginning, that it all depends on one's environment. There are certain things we would want to do that we cannot do in our home environments. So maybe that would also suggest that we become creative in thinking of new things.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, now let's talk about something you're now known for. You became the de facto spokesperson of the people who had traveled and ended up in the quarantine. What prompted you to speak out, Doctor? Because everyone seemed to be silent then.
First of all, I would want to correct that impression. I'm not really the spokesperson of the people in quarantine.
Oh, yes.
I was just speaking out for myself and others that were caught up in the situation. Maybe I ended up speaking more than anyone else, but I believe there are many others that were speaking that may not have been heard. What really made me speak up, I've always been a person that does not accept to be suppressed without talking. This I've done through my cartoons, through my articles in the papers, in the Observer. So even this time when I was faced with that situation, I knew that what would help, of course I wasn't sure, but I just expected that it could help if I brought it in the media, if I brought it to the people's attention, my followers on Facebook, that maybe the voice could reach those that were concerned, because we tried talking to them in the first place, and that would have been our first attempt, and we tried doing that, but they never seemed to listen. So that's why we had to run out to social media and all other possible alternatives. But I've always been that kind of person that speaks when I feel that something is not right. And if I follow other alternative channels and they don't seem to yield. So that's exactly what I try to do.
Well, now that you have actually been there, how best do you think should a quarantine be handled?
I beg your pardon?
Now that you've been there, how can a quarantine be best done?
How can a quarantine be?
Best done, like as a nation, how best can we improve on the quarantine areas or the entire process?
All right. Yeah, first I expected that since This pandemic had been on for some time. Way back from November, we had already started hearing stories of what was happening in China, then Italy, and other places. So what I expected is that at least we would have some preparation in terms of course, not everything. I understand our limitations. I understand also that this is a new disease and it comes along with certain things about which knowledge is not yet complete, or about which we are still simply guessing in certain ways. But on things like quarantining, I think would expect anyone dealing with that kind of disease that you would have to quarantine at a certain point. So for us not to have a center that was ready, even a single center, because we were the first to be quarantined, so I would have expected that at least we have one center that is ready, that we have an idea about how ideal quarantining is supposed to be, that when people get there to quarantine, first of all, you put measures that make sure that they cannot escape, that there are no loopholes that can be exploited for corruption, one bribing their way out. And second, that the people themselves are protected, that you don't just dump them there and expose them to risks of mutual infection, which is what we were exposed to. Okay. So I would have expected that all that was in place, that would be kept in our rooms, that in the first place, we would be briefed about how we were expected to behave while in quarantine. What I observed was that we were expected to behave in certain ways without being told anything. Well, some of us would know, but the number that did not know, and you wouldn't take any risk to expect that these people would know. So to simply take us from the airport and put us at an hotel and expect that everyone would know what to do, I think that was wrong in the first place. And these are basics that we would have known, would have been able to address, because it's not our first time to quarantine. We have used quarantine during Ebola and some other epidemics.
My bad.
So yes, I found that a little strange that we're not even prepared for that. Yes, so we could do better there.
Well, now that you're back home, psychologically, how did your family receive you and the community around you? Did you get any stigma in any sense?
For the community around me, not yet, because I'm not interacting with them. We were expected to continue with self-isolation when we get home, so that's what I'm still doing. The family at home, of course, at some distance, we talk. I noticed that my kids in the first place had already gotten a polluted mind about people in quarantine. They thought that everyone in quarantine is sick. So my daughter asks me, "Do you have coronavirus?"
Oh dear.
I ask why, and she says, "I heard the president say that people with coronavirus are in quarantine." Well, that felt a little terrible, and it's the impression that has been built and not corrected by the Ministry of Health. I don't know for whatever reason, but I think there should have been clear sensitization that by the time we leave quarantine to join a society, people know that we have been tested over and over again. I'm more sure about my status maybe than so many other people out there, because I've been tested 3 times. Yeah, but the impression out there is that if you're coming from quarantine, most likely you're sick. So at home, it has been traumatizing for them what we went through. The environment at Central Inn, which was very risky, where there was a high possibility of us getting infection. Yeah, but I think they are getting over it. Personally, I'm getting over the trauma, and currently I'm more interested in supporting where I can for government or whoever is involved in these initiatives for fighting COVID. I wouldn't want to put so much national attention at what we have gone through. Yes, it has been painful, but we don't have the time for that. I think much of the time should be used to seeing what we can do to fight this pandemic better.
Given that kind of statement, how best for someone who is currently in the quarantine, possibly in the hospital with COVID-19, but watching Morning at NTV this Saturday morning, what advice would you pass on to them?
Sorry, I'm losing you.
I was saying that given that someone is in the hospital and is positive for COVID-19, or he or she is in the quarantine right now somewhere, and they're watching you, what advice would you pass on to them?
Well, the first advice is acceptance. Acceptance is very important. It's a difficult thing, but it's very important to accept in the first place. If you're positive, to accept that yes, I'm positive, but also to know that there are so many other people that have been positive but have been able to beat the disease. Actually, the biggest percentage of people who get infected manage to get through. So many think that this would be a death certificate. Once I'm announced positive, that's it, but that's not the case. So if one remains with that positivity, with that hope, I think it helps them even fight the disease better and not to have a defeatist mentality. So if anyone is positive, yeah, that should be kept in their mind to encourage them even to fight on better. Those who are in quarantine, at least they should count or look at us who have been there and know that it's possible to finish quarantine, although I think ours has been harder than that of any other person. 24 days. We were the first into quarantine and almost the last to leave. I know there are some people who are still there. Actually, unfortunately, I've just heard that even some among us are still being quarantined. I don't know for whatever reason. Yeah, but I would encourage people who are there, if it's for a good reason, to be patient and understand that it's for the protection of society and themselves, their families. But if it's for reasons that are wrong, as was in our case, then I would urge them to fight it by all means possible.
Well, Doctor, how has this affected your work?
Well, there are things I would have been able to do on my laptop or to draw, whatever. But generally, I think most workplaces had been closed. The universities were closed. So there are certain things that still I wouldn't do even if I was out. But of those that I could do, like on my laptop, of course, I was not in the right state of mind to do much of the constructive work I would have desired to do. So it really affected me a lot that I would spend much of the time seated in my room. You just look at the walls and then once in a while you draw a cartoon, but which cartoons were sometimes out of anger or sometimes out of the need to do some activism around what was going on. But I think I would have used that time better if I wasn't in such a situation. Or if I was in quarantine and I knew that, yes, I'm in quarantine for the right reasons and I'm being treated the way I'm supposed to be treated, maybe that as well would have been helpful. But when you have this in your mind, that I'm being mistreated, that I'm being tortured, this is not how I'm supposed to be, I'm not supposed to go through it, then it makes everything difficult. It makes your coping abilities almost impossible. It somehow affects everything that you do. So I wasn't able to do as much as I would have done if I was under normal circumstances. Yes, the circumstances were generally abnormal. Even for others who are out, I understand there are many things that they can't do from home. Yeah, but in our situation, the injustice even made it worse.
Thank you so much for having this conversation with us, Doctor. We so much appreciate, and we
You're
hope we get
welcome.
through
You're
this safe
welcome.
and sound.